Taking control of digital storage with Jeff Carlson. This is MacVoices. This MacVoices is supported by OpenCase. MagSafe Perfected. Get 10% off at theopencase.com with the code MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, pre-show, we were talking with Jeff Carlson about how long it's been since he was on MacVoices. I can't believe how long it's been. So we have Jeff Carlson back to play a lot of catch-up. Jeff, it's great to see you. How did this much time get by us?
Well, see, here's the thing. So we figured out that it was November of 2024 that we spoke. And to me, November feels like it was maybe 2 months ago. So I think it's been that kind of a year where suddenly we're into September and not really realizing how it got to be this way.
Good. Okay, because I'm with you. Although for me, November feels like 2 weeks ago. So,
oh geez,
I think we're both having the same time warp experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So we have two big things to talk about, but I think the first one most appropriate is to talk about your update, which is not absolutely current now, but it was released, I think back in June, if memory serves. Take control of digital storage, or an upgrade to take control of digital storage.
Yeah.
This always, I think this is one of those books that I look at and think, I don't want to give this to a lot of people, because they don't really understand the evolution of storage, some of the new options that are out there, and what the benefits are, and frankly, as well as a couple of the risks. So I'm going to let you tell me, what were some of your favorite things, or you think the most important things in that upgrade?
Yeah. So you're right. This is kind of a weird book to me. Maybe this is just my own, odd personal angle to it, but I've always sort of felt like, why would anybody buy a book about storage? Because basically we kind of understand that storage is a hard drive, or maybe like a portable SSD or something like that. And it's just a place where things get stored, right? But then when you either dig into it, or more importantly, if you run into some sort of a trouble, some problems crop up, then suddenly storage becomes a completely different deal. Then it's either, where have my files gone, or why is my disk showing up with errors, or why have I run out of space when I thought I had a lot of space, and what can I do about it? So it was a topic. So this is the third edition that's out now. And when we first started this, and people can go back and look at my conversations with you earlier, but I think it still holds the same. You get into this and think, it's not something that I really need day to day, but when something happens, or when I brush up against something, it's the type of thing that you would reach for to figure out, all right, why are my disks being converted to APFS? And what is APFS? And I thought I had a handle on how the Finder tracks free space, but it seems to be shifting. What's going on? Like, all those little things just kind of roll up together until suddenly you're, throwing up your hands and saying, well, I don't know what's going on. Do I need to buy a new hard disk? Well, I can't just put a new hard disk into my Apple laptop anymore. That's not a thing. Or how much extra storage do I need? Do I need to buy a network attached storage unit? And, you can see like things kind of build and build and build. And the next logical step would be, well, now you got to go out and spend hours researching and doing Google searches and figuring out what people like and what they don't like. And if you go on Reddit, you're going to see everything about what people like and don't like and which advice to take. And so this really is where I think Take Control shines. And I'm, not just because this is my book, but the whole series, because this is the type of thing where I need some practical answers. I need some answers that someone has already spent the time figuring this out. And this is kind of one of those books. This is a book where I went into it thinking, I know plenty about storage, and realizing that I know a good, I don't know, like, 3 inches below the surface type of knowledge. And what you really need sometimes is like the 12 inches below the surface type of knowledge. I don't know if that metaphor makes any sense at all, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I do. And again, I think that there are a lot of folks out there that storage, I mean, we used to know storage as a box that you bought and plugged into your computer if it wasn't already built in, if you didn't have adequate built in.
Yeah.
And so much has changed there because Apple has decided, and for business reasons as well as other reasons, to decrease the size of standard internal storage, unless you're willing to, donate a kidney to get a lot of higher capacity. But on the other hand, we have up to Thunderbolt 5. So now we have some really fast connections for external storage. But to take advantage of that, you have to make sure that you use the term SSD, solid state drive, which are light years faster than the spinning drives that a lot of us grew up with.
Yeah.
But even those get confusing because, okay, so you buy a little solid state drive that, it used to be the size of a pack of cigarettes. Now it's the size of a stick of gum, maybe, or smaller.
Yeah.
And or depending on what machine you have or what other devices you're using, now an SSD might refer to an NVMe SSD might refer to something that looks more like a memory card that we used to use, as opposed to a drive that is all enclosed. So it's very confusing if you aren't paying attention and don't exactly know what your needs really are or could be or should be.
Yeah. And in fact, I mean, your examples are spot on, because when you start to look into let's say we've run out of space and we need to find some external storage. I think in the past, or maybe still, you would think, well, maybe I'm going to go to Costco or Best Buy or something, and I'm just going to buy a big external drive. Well, like maybe you could do that, but then you have to consider what your needs are. You have to consider that what's in that inexpensive external box, you may get a whole lot of capacity, but maybe the drives themselves are not great. Like maybe they're only 5,400 RPM instead of 7,200 RPM. Or if you want to get like an SSD or go with NVMe storage, well, suddenly there are a whole bunch of different types and categories and, different nomenclature for the different parts and the speeds that you quickly get overwhelmed. I mean, in fact, I couldn't name any of them to you right now because I put them in a book, because it's not something that even I deal with on a day-to-day basis. But like I said, when you reach that point, when you need it, suddenly you're browsing someplace like, newegg.com. That is a great resource for, getting computer hardware. But boy, do you have to know what you're looking for. And you have to, determine like not just the capacity that you want, but the speed that you can get. And do you have the right cable that will actually interface well and get the maximum speeds with your MacBook Pro, for example? There was even, I want to say 2 generations ago of MacBook Pros, like for whatever reason, the Thunderbolt ports would not work with the highest speed that they were supposed to. And so, you would buy something thinking, all right, I just spent $60 extra to get this higher capacity, higher speed input output route. And the computer's not actually doing that. So it's just sort of $60 thrown away. So again, I'm just sort of throwing out various examples, but it gets confusing, and especially like you mentioned Thunderbolt 5, that was something that was added to this edition. Thunderbolt 5, great, fast, but can you run it? Will your computer be able to tackle those speeds? If you were to get like a little external box that's Thunderbolt 5, like, is that going to really take advantage of the speed that's possible? And I think the bigger question that also I try to answer in the book is, like, do you really need it? Yes, we absolutely want the fastest speeds possible, but do you? Like, wanting and needing is always that different thing. I mean, my example, I am a photographer as well as a writer. And so I would expect that I would have, Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 5 drives. I actually don't. Most of my drives are just USB 3 Gen 2, I think it is. Just because, like, I'm not processing vast amounts of video or doing photo editing all day long. And so I could get those faster things, but what I have right now works fine for my situation. If you are, maybe a game developer, or you're doing a lot of 3D rendering and you need to offload a lot of that data, or maybe work from an external drive where all your data is, you literally like need that speed in order to boost your productivity and be able to handle the volume of data and the volume of work that you're going to have. Like, that's when you actually, like, time literally is money. And so that's a good investment. For most of us, maybe not. Now, those will trickle down. So pretty soon, maybe Thunderbolt 4 will be kind of the only option that you get because manufacturers don't need to support anything before that. Who knows? But again, like, there are so many variables. Why are there so many variables, Chuck?
You're the one that wrote the book, Jeff. I don't know.
I know.
But you mentioned the cables, which is something I've tend to forget about. I mean, it used to be that a USB cable was a USB cable was a USB cable, and now you with USB-C and the power transfer, the difference between data transfer and charging capability, and you wonder why one cable is $25 and another one is $5, and it's like, well, there are reasons. It's not just somebody's marketing, and so you really. Yeah. Because also you mentioned, that you spent $60 extra. If I decided to spend that $60 extra, it was kind of intentional. And so, yeah, if that means I have to add another couple bucks to get a better cable, then that's what I got to do if I want to protect that investment. And it just, it makes me crazy that nobody will label these cables. They all have their little, once they come out of the box, you can't tell. And so, I think that's I understand why they do it. It's probably good for business for them. But boy, from our side, I've started trying to tag the cables, that I can confirm what it is that they're best at, and go from there.
Like, that is a huge frustration. I have some cables, and this is going to sound simplistic, but if possible, like, getting colored cables really helps. Like, I have just a set of longish, bright red cables, and they are not good at all for data transfer, but they will handle the higher capacity for power transfer. And so when I need to make sure that my laptop or my phone, things that can work with like the higher charging speeds, then I plug it into that. On the other hand, I also have like another black cable that is good for high-speed data transfer. So if I'm doing a backup of, like I said, like, let's say I go do a photo shoot and I want to put the images that I imported into my computer, and I'm going to shuffle those off, a copy of those onto an SSD just so that I have an extra backup right away. Well, if I grab the wrong cable, that's going to take a long, long time. So I need to make sure that I have this cable or this other blue one that I know is shorter but will work with high data speeds in order to move all that data, gigabytes and gigabytes of data, across to the SSD. It's impossible to just look at a cable now and know. I mean, before it was, oh, look, this has Lightning on one end and USB on the other end. And now so many of the cables are USB-C, which is great because they fit into everything, but rarely is there a good, easy indication to show this is one that will, it'll charge your iPhone, but you're only going to get USB 2 speeds out of it. So you're going to need something that will do the charging. And if you're offloading some video from your phone, for example, you're going to need something that is not included with the phone that you have to buy separately that can handle the faster speeds. So it's crazy making. It really is. So hopefully the book provides that sort of detail.
And that's exactly why I said this is one of those books that I want to give to people and say, here, just invest a little bit of time, because Jeff explains it all. Yes, it's a little geeky because that's the world we have live in, that the manufacturers have not standardized. And again, for good reason, because not everybody needs a $500 hard drive that can write an incredible amount of data per second. So, they target a lower market, but that just confuses things. And, there's one other point I wanted to, and I know you'll agree with this. If you go to the big box store and buy that 18 terabyte hard drive and you think, oh boy, I will never fill this up. There's the little matter of backing it up. So you may want to buy 2, maybe 3 of them to make sure, to your point, they don't necessarily always perform, and they may not last as long as something else that you've had in the past does, because they're being manufactured and targeted for a different audience.
Oh, absolutely. Like 100%. And also knowing what you need. Like, for example, I've switched to mostly using SSDs for my laptop backup, just because I just want it to happen as fast as possible. My media backup, I have, I bought a couple of 7,200 RPM drives and I put them into an enclosure from MacSales.com. I can't remember the name of the company now.
Otherworld Computing.
Otherworld Computing. Yes, thank you. Because that was a good trade-off of being affordable. Again, as a little aside, a lot of these purchases that we make tend to happen when there are big sales, like Labor Day, Amazon Prime Day. That's when a lot of hard drives will go on sale, and so you think, oh well, maybe now is a good time. I can get a great deal on a big high capacity external drive. And by doing it this way, kind of building your own, I knew what I was putting into it. I didn't have to just sort of wonder if this was a Western Digital 4-year-old. I once got an external drive that failed pretty quickly, and it turned out the drive inside was like 6 years old or something like that. And so, no wonder it failed. So in this way, I built my own, but then you got to figure out, okay, now what are you going to do to back that up? And so getting back to my original point on this little loop here, the thing that you're using for backup, like that doesn't necessarily need to be the 7,200 RPM or the fast SSD. You just need something that will copy data across. And if it's something big and it's something that you can schedule, well, it doesn't need to do that quickly. It can just move things more slowly to a high capacity in the middle of the night. So, you don't necessarily need to think, all right, I need to get the fastest. Sometimes you need the fastest for the thing that you're working with on a day-to-day basis, but the backup drive, that can just be nice and slow and pokey. And as long as you can retrieve that information, then you're golden.
Agreed.
So,
Unless unless you have the need to be able to recover an entire drive's worth of data rapidly. And there's some business situations that might be the case. I'm like you. I kind of opt for the lower performance, better deal when it comes to just flat out backup drives. I'm more interested in reliability for those than speed.
Yeah.
So but I also want to point out, especially for OWC and some of those kinds of manufacturers, you said build your own drive. And so people out there are saying, well, I would never build my own drive. And it's not that they make it easy because they sell you the empty drive and then you buy they sell you the empty case. Yeah. And then you install it. And usually it's one Allen wrench or a Phillips head screwdriver. It's brain dead simple because there's only one way to plug it in. But you're the one providing the labor as opposed to someone else. And you can take advantage of the sales Jeff mentioned so that you can buy something and get what you need, as opposed to, and also, there are a few more gymnastics involved, but you can use that same enclosure and upgrade it later.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
no, that's a great point. And also, I'm not trying to make this into a commercial for the vendors that I've used in the past, but that's a good example of knowing where your components come from. I mean, you can go on Amazon and you can buy external, like just bare external enclosures for, just a few bucks, but I like the trust level oftentimes, especially, Amazon's not great about having good quality stuff lately, especially if it's from, a Chinese company that has basically just mashed some words together in order to create a brand. That's not always the case, but it seems like more and more it's the case of, you're sort of taking a pot shot at whether or not you're going to spend less money, but who knows what kind of quality you're going to get. And there are all sorts of horror stories of, I bought this thing and I got a literal brick in the mail, or I bought this thing and it turns out that the components aren't actually soldered very well, or, all this stuff. And so you think, well, I saved a bunch of money buying this. Well, did you really? Because if it goes down, then you're in for a lot of time to replace it. And also, going back to like the priority for a book like this anyway is like, this is your data. This is your important information. So, you can kind of half-ass it to try to, save some time and save some money, but maybe you'll get bitten on the other side. So
I couldn't agree more. Agree more. Because when you're evaluating, just to reiterate it a little differently, when you're evaluating these kind of things, it's not just the hardware that you are looking at. It's what is going on that hardware. And so how long would it take you to recover, your financial records if they were on a hard drive that went bad?
Yeah.
Only you can answer that. But I know I don't even want to think about it.
Nope.
Today's MacVoices is supported by OpenCase. MagSafe Perfected. Get 10% off at theopencase.com with the code MacVoices. When you think about an iPhone case, you probably don't think about accessories. A case is a case, right? Wrong. That's exactly where OpenCase changes the game. OpenCase is a patented case with a literal open back in the back, and that open space is more than just a clever design. It's the foundation for an entire ecosystem of accessories. Need a wallet? OpenCase has one that fits seamlessly into the back of your OpenCase, cradled so it doesn't slide off like the traditional MagSafe wallets. Prefer to hold your phone? Pop in their pop holder accessory, and you've got a secure handle on things. On the go, OpenCase has a car mount charger just for you. Not on the go? Your standby stand keeps your phone visible at all times. Going stealth? A filler plate fills in that open space so it looks like any other case. Power users? OpenCase works with chargers, batteries, and most third-party MagSafe accessories too. And when it's time to charge, Apple recommends you keep nothing between your phone and the charger. Exactly what OpenCase delivers. That means optimized MagSafe charging every single time, no fiddling required. Wallets, stands, chargers, OpenCase makes it all possible. Lighter, slimmer, smarter, and more functional. It's not just a case, it's a platform. Explore the line of OpenCase accessories as well as the OpenCase itself, and get yours today at theopencase.com. Use the promo code MacVoices for 10% off. That's theopencase.com and the code MacVoices for 10% off. Thanks to OpenCase for their support of MacVoices.
There's one more thing that I wanted to talk about that's in the book that's new in this edition, because most of what this book has been in the past has been all about your Mac. Like there's a whole sections on like the file systems, and I especially recommend if people are thinking about like getting into disk utility, which I know is like the most nerdy thing you probably heard today. It's like, ooh, yeah, I definitely want to get into disk utility, but it has explanations for like the APFS file system, which like who cares? Well, if you need to reformat a drive, you're going to care very much. And if you're going to set up an external drive and deciding which kind of file system to use, and do you need to partition it, or do you need to create new volumes, and like all of this kind of stuff. And disk first aid, there's a whole section on, like what it means when you're fixing your disk and all of that. So that has really been a focus of this book. But of course, we are not all using Macs all the time. And so I've added new sections that talk about, so in the latest versions of iOS and iPadOS, and depending on the hardware that you have, you can work with external drives from an iPad or an iPhone. And the Files app has ways for you to go and like you can erase drives, you can reformat them and do some of that. Like not everything that you can do on a Mac, but more the stuff that you would need right away. So you buy an SSD and you need to offload a bunch of video files or photos or something onto that from your iPhone. Well, that SSD is probably going to come formatted with the Windows file system, and the Mac will read it, but that may not be the most efficient way to do this. So you can, erase it from scratch using your phone or your iPad. And so there's discussion in there about like how to do that, why you'd want to do that, how to move files from external devices to your iPhone or your iPad, because like there's no Finder. You have to do everything through the Files app. And it's not always easy to figure out where the stuff is. Like sometimes you just have to tap and hold on something and then you see the different options. So there's some more detail into that because, there are some people who are only using iPads instead of also using a Mac. Like maybe that's their main computer, or maybe they're just on their phone all the time. And every once in a while, you run into a situation where you got to deal with storage. You got to deal with, clearing out some of the storage on your mobile device, that kind of thing. So I wanted to make sure that this is, covering, the whole spectrum of what today's Apple using person would have. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because you're right. It's easy to forget now that with the more modern iPads, you do have external storage options that are convenient and almost Mac-like in a lot of ways. And as we record this, we're a few weeks away from the release of the next versions of especially of iPhone and iPadOS, and they're going to bring a lot of new capabilities as well.
Yeah.
There's one other thing I know is in this book that is relatively new, and that's network attached storage.
Mm-hmm.
And I have kind of an on-off relationship with network attached storage. 1 minute I love it, the next minute not so much, and I just want to go back to
Oh.
direct connect. And some of it has to do with the fact that it is network attached, and therefore, depending on which vendor you use, it may be open to the internet. And there are security
Mm-hmm.
holes not holes, security issues that you have to jump through that you don't have with the direct connect device. And yet
Mm-hmm.
network attached storage can be so useful because it opens up a lot of the storage you have to when you're in another room in the house, or maybe, in another state. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to just get you, without trying to do a full-blown tutorial on network attached storage, any thoughts on the goods and the bads of this?
Yeah. So that was actually a difficult section to write because um, it was hard to drill down into a lot of the details without having, like, uh, Synology does it this way and another vendor does it this way. And so a lot of what's covered in the book is, I wouldn't say like a really high level, but some of it is what to look for when you're buying a NAS unit, and some of the situations that you would run into in terms of what it can do and what some of those like security things that you mentioned. So I have a Synology NAS that's I can't remember how old it is now, but it's um, you know it serves me very well. I know that I don't use it to its fullest capacity, just because it is a separate computer. It can do so much more. Um, so, like, I think trying to figure out how to answer your question. Um, I mean, what the book does is it really sort of lays out what the options are and what things to look for and what things to specifically try to configure for kind of most situations. I still really like having a NAS. There are times, yeah, that I wish I could just plug it in, and some NAS units you can plug in directly, especially if you're working with massive video files, things like that. Um, but it is like another thing you have to wrap your head around, not just how that particular NAS operating system works, but also, like how to transfer files over to it. What's the best way of doing that? Do you get one like mine? On occasion, when I've had like maybe some big video projects, I could transfer it over my home network. And like my home network is, I don't know, speedy enough, but I'm sure it's not. I mean, it's not state of the art by any means. So, like, it was easier for me to put to offload everything onto an SSD. Just, I mean, I want to say it was probably almost 600, 800 gigabytes. I mean, just a massive amount of data. It was easier to put those on an SSD and then plug the SSD into a USB port that was on the NAS, and sort of, just it's like uh, it's like modern sneakernet, only I just had to reach from, like one end of my desk to the other end of my desk. But it still needed that, like it needed to be physically transported over to the NAS. And that just turned out to be a much easier way than to just have it, crank for, I mean, that amount of data. It would have taken hours. I don't know how many hours. And if you have an even faster network, and there's some discussion in there about like what Ethernet options are available on some of the NAS boxes. Sometimes you just get sort of like your regular. Sometimes you can get a higher speed version. So many questions. I don't think I have a good answer for you other than I'm sorry that it drives you crazy, but
I, I didn't really expect an answer, is because again, I've come to the conclusion they both have their place. It's just
yes,
a matter
yes,
of me having to, because I'd love to just say, okay, I'm just going to go direct connect and that's it. And then I
hmm
find out that maybe like a Plex server, that now I no longer have an option for a Plex server to store my
hmm
data on. And so, okay, no, I'm going to go the whole way over to NAS. And then just the kind of scenario you talked about, it's like, oh, why is it taking forever to copy this stuff over? So
yeah.
yeah, it's just, once again, you got to be educated as to what each option is and then figure out what it is for you.
Yeah. Well, and also because, I mean, some of these can get really expensive. I mean, there are definitely affordable NASs, but there are also some that, you will spend like $700-800 and you're just getting a box. You're not getting drives. And which drives do you put in it? Because there are hard drives that work better in a NAS setup, just because of the way they read data and the constancy, I think that's a word, of how the data is accessed, and also like what happens when one of those drives fails. Some things you can basically fairly easily just pop the drive out and put another one in, but then it has to do a bunch of internal stuff to shuffle data around and to make sure you're not going to lose any of that data. So yeah, many questions. Here we are bringing up lots of questions and no good answers, but goodbye.
Well, but Jeff, I think these are the kind of questions people need to be aware. They need to know how to ask the questions and then come to the
Yes.
book and get the answers.
Yes.
Because otherwise, in fact, I'm sure there are folks out there that are going to say, "What language are they speaking?" Even the most tech savvy, because there's so many changes and they seem to be happening so fast. So that's why we need things like this, and they need to be updated on a reasonably consistent basis. Maybe not every 6 months, but they need to be, because it is changing that fast.
Yeah, exactly.
I had one other question I wanted to ask you, so I'm going to co-opt the interview for my personal benefit and maybe for the
Okay.
benefit of the listeners. But you're the perfect guy to ask because you've just written the book on digital storage. You're also a photographer. I'm not a photographer, but somehow I've play with them and play with cameras and all. And I have a lot of memory cards sitting around.
Mm.
Is there any danger? Is there a disadvantage to maybe sticking one of those in the slot on my MacBook Pro and using that as a storage medium, recognizing,
Mm-hmm.
I'll do this for you and then I'll let you go, recognizing it's not going to be the same kind of performance as an SSD or anything else. But if I just need raw storage on something that then maybe I could even pull over onto the SSD if I need to really work with it, is this something I should be trying, or am I just looking for trouble?
Yes and yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
So, I actually have, I talk about this in the book, because especially now you can get memory cards that are, I mean, up to, I think, I know that there's at least 1 terabyte, and I may have seen even 2 or 4 terabyte cards that are either out or going to be out. But yeah, like that's a huge amount of storage. The problem is that you're not going to get very good performance out of it because it's not really intended to be a high speed data port. Like it's fast. It'll copy things over faster than a lot of sort of regular USB speeds, but it's really meant for that for writing data and then reading it off. And this is the other part of this, which is like yes, you could do that. And in fact, there's even a company that makes, I want to say it's Transcend, it's in the book, that makes like a little module that sits in your MacBook Pro SD card slot, and it sits flush. So it's kind of like you're adding another hard drive. But the problem is with most of the regular memory cards, like you're going to get SanDisk or something that's designed for your camera. Like they're not really designed to do a lot of IO data, a lot of reading and a lot of writing, and so that can I think shorten the lifespan of the card because of the way it writes data to it. So yes, it can work, but I wouldn't use it as like an always as a constant solution for like, hey, now I have 500 extra gigs of data. It's like you do, but I think you would probably notice, depending on what you're doing with it, like, going back to kind of the backup issue, if you're just using it to store extra stuff, it's probably fine. But if you are using it to like store a bunch of files and you're working with those files directly on a constant basis, then it would make more sense to move those over to your internal drive, which is going to be a lot faster, a lot more responsive, and really designed for that reading, writing swiftness, I guess you could say.
Okay. That's pretty much what I thought, because I've played with some of the lower capacities just because I had them laying around here. And other than performance issues, like you said, read and write speeds, I haven't seen any problems. But there is that little siren song, like you said, of a 1 terabyte card. It's like, wow, wouldn't it be great to have an extra terabyte in this thing? Even just for the things that I use, once every 2 months, but it's nice to have them right there when you need them. So
I would actually be more concerned about having it just sticking out the side of my laptop. So depending on if you're moving it around, or I mean, there's also the possibility that you have a like an external dock, like a Thunderbolt dock that has a memory card reader. I suppose that could also work. Probably not as fast as the one built into your laptop or your what, like, does the Mac Studio has one, not the Mac Mini. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. So yes, I think for general storage, I think it's probably fine, just as long as you're, I guess, not treating it as if it's your internal drive. Maybe that's the best way of saying it.
I hadn't even thought about sticking one in an external dock. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You succeeded again in an interview giving me homework. That's just great.
More homework. You're going to go spend more money.
Yeah, exactly. So before we wrap up, and first of all, let's wrap the book and say that Take Control Books is where you go to get this. You guys, if you've listened to this show and you've listened to our interviews with Jeff, you know the shtick. There's some great prices on some absolutely indispensable materials. Jeff puts a lot of time into these, just as all the other Take Control authors do. And they're probably about as close to a definitive guide to the subjects as you can get outside of the manufacturer. In fact, sometimes the manufacturer don't even bother anymore. They just rely on people like Jeff and Joe to tell them what to do. So,
I will mention, just in terms of like the basic details. It's $14.99 for the book, and it's 165 pages. So this is by no means a slight book. And then, or if you you can get the book and Take Control Premium, which I think Joe has come and talked about. That's $22.49. So
perfect.
Just to get the basics out of there.
Yeah. And just like with everything else, the basics keep changing now that Joe has introduced Take Control Premium. So
yes,
if you're not familiar with that, go back and listen to the interview we did with Joe about the hows and whys. That's important.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.